I just watched Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior. This was a member request from Jay. This was a super fun movie. I'm not sure if I like this one better than the first one or not. It's really hard to say because they feel really different. At the core, they've got a lot of the same world building, obviously, but the first movie is functioning sort of as a simple revenge story and the world in a state of deterioration. This movie is much more similar to Fury Road and Furiosa, where the world has already gone to shit and the cabals have kind of taken over. This one leans much more into the kind of zaniness of the Mad Max world. The first one, the gangs felt like kind of just bike gangs, but a little bit eccentric, a little bit crazy, but not too off the charts or too unhinged. This one, they go full bore with it. The main bad guy with a red mohawk wears assless pants with a little flap over them. His buddy wears one of those nipple shirts. They all have crazy mohawks, and the style's starting to get more like an Oakland Raiders fan with the spiky shoulder pads and the crazy mask and all that sort of thing. It's a really fun movie for sure, and the budget for this one is way bigger than the first one. To be clear though, the budget for both is tiny. The first one was $350,000 in US money. The second was in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 million, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 times bigger. And you can see it on screen. The practical effects are pretty sweet throughout the whole movie. The dude on the left here, who you may recognize as the guy that talks to Obi-Wan Kenobi in The Revenge of the Sith and says that they're holding them hostage, doesn't look too different here. Has a fucking gyrocopter. And I was looking into it a little bit, and apparently the gyrocopter was actually in use for like 30 years after this movie came out, and they actually used it in the movie, which is kind of nuts to think about, because I don't know if that would ever happen now, just because of the risk and how easy they turn to CGI or volume or whatever you want to call it. They just wreck car after car in this movie. They wreck a tanker at the end. The gyrocopter crashes, although it still looks usable. I imagine they didn't want to destroy that just for the scene. It's pretty awesome to see all that stuff, and you can tell how much effort goes into it. Even the opening scene, a car flips like right away. At one point, Max's car rolls down a hill and explodes. There's a big ass explosion near the end of the movie where he's rigged something with dynamite. And as much as I could tell, there was still some of that in Fury Road, but it didn't seem to be quite as much. And in Furiosa, which I actually just rewatched both of these movies in the last week. Well, I put them on in the background while I read a book. They look to have a lot of CG in them. No surprise with some of the stuff that's going on, but you really appreciate seeing the physical stuff all actually there and things actually happening. I feel like you pick up on it at least subconsciously, even if you don't notice it on screen, that these things are physical and not just animated in front of a green screen or blue screen or whatever. And you can really tell that George Miller, his entire approach is, I want sweet action. And the timeline, meh. The world building, meh. I want good action scenes and violence. And this movie embellishes in both of those things. This movie really gets into the cool action scenes, kind of the explosions, the tankers trying to fight off a bunch of the sort of pimped out derby cars. I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but the muscle cars all have stuff added to them. The tanker has spikes and shit on it and people on top throwing Molotovs. So you see that pretty big change from 1 to 2. I would say this one is definitely the more fun movie, but as far as just the writing and world building and setup, I think 1 might do a lot of the heavy lifting in that regard. You know, in the first one, there was police and the bad guys all had kind of funky names also. This one is just the Wild West or Wild Australia. So just Australia.
Boom. Roasted.
And, you know, you get your bad guy, Lord Humongous, who is played by some kind of Olympian weightlifter. He looks big as shit. Pretty simple, but pretty cool villain. He wants the gas in the town. They don't want to give it to him. You don't have to go crazy. It's Mad Max. There is a little bit of interesting messaging, which kind of surprised me. Because, you know, you don't really expect too much of a message in Mad Max. It's really just kind of a crazy world and cars and explosions. The message of this movie, to me, seems to be pretty clearly that just because the world has gone to shit doesn't mean that people have to. And there's sort of a commentary there on trying to help people out and kind of your obligation to society and rebuilding, and not to just turn evil because there's no official law enforcement or definitive, almost certain punishment and that sort of deal. To quickly go through the plot to give context, Max is looking for gas. He finds the gyrocopter pilot. That guy says, hey, there's a town that has all kinds of gas. You can have as much as you want. The town is being invaded by Lord Humongous and his group because they want the gas. And they say, hey, can you help us out? And he says, well, I'll make a deal with you. You know, there's a truck that can pull that tanker. You guys can use all the gas and move it away from here and then give them the town because that's what Lord Humongous wants. So Max goes and gets the truck that can actually pull the tanker. The gyrocopter guy helps him out from the sky. He holds up his end of the bargain. He says, fill my car up and I can have as much gas as I can take. And he's on his way. Him and the leader of the friendly group, Papa Gallo, get into a pretty heated conversation. And Papa Gallo is essentially like, look, the world's going to shit for everybody. We've all lost family. What's your deal? And Max punches him in the face. And Papa Gallo tells him that he's nothing better than any of the rest of these pieces of shit, but he leaves anyway. So Lord Humongous's people chase after Max because Max, along with the other town with the gas, has killed some of their people and they're upset. And of course, because it's a movie and Max has a dog, the dog has to get shot in the face to make you feel bad and piss Max off, although he actually doesn't seem that upset about it. So he ends up going back to the town. He says that he'll help out. And Papa Gallo says, okay, you can drive the tanker because you're our best shot. So Max goes, drives the tanker. He's fighting off all the type of cars that you've seen in the Fury Road movie, if you've seen it. Like the sort of dune buggy, pimped out with armor and shit, and the muscle cars and all that. And him and a few guys fight them all off, and it ends up with the tanker flipping over. But at that point, he's already won. And we find out that his tanker was just full of dirt, and that they had actually pumped the fuel into a bunch of barrels and taken it on the school bus in town. So all the fuel was already with the other people, and he was a decoy. And he just kind of laughs, presumably at the irony that he used them for fuel, and then they used him for fuel, as they made their way 2,000 miles away to a place that they believed was safe. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting message, I think, for how simplistic of a movie it really is. Just the idea of helping out the community when you're able to, helping out people in need just because it's the right thing to do. What kind of selfless efforts are required in a society like this where it's not functioning? There's no government to take care of the common problems. There's no churches to help take care of the community. It's literally just the people. And you can contrast this to in the beginning, he sees people getting attacked and just kind of watches it happen. Now, I think it's both a pragmatic decision, but also an indication of who he is. I don't know if he had rushed down there to try to help him, if he really could have done much, but we see him watch a woman get just stripped, beaten, presumably raped and killed through binoculars. So I don't think it's necessarily an indictment on his morality, but he never even considers going to help. He literally just watches it happen and then goes down and wants their gas as they're dying. It's a really interesting jump from the first one to the second one, because I think they're different in almost every capacity except for the world itself, which is kind of interesting. Because the first one, you spend a lot of time with Max as a husband. He's becoming a father. He's trying to uphold the law and help the police. And he's just kind of a normal dude. And then once his wife and kid get killed, he takes it to revenge and goes and hunts down all the people who killed them and were a part of that group. But it's not really even that outlandish in the Mad Max world because of how much the cops and gangs were on even footing. He just takes it personally. Obviously, his cop friend died, his wife died, his kid died, and he's like, fuck this, and goes on a revenge quest. And you get that much more serious tone. It's almost more intimate, I would say, in the first one. And this one, it's much more, he's just trying to get by. He's embraced this world. It kind of is what it is, and he's just living his life. Like, he understands that people are going to die. He's doing what he can to get fuel. He's just looking out for himself and his dog primarily. And while the things that are happening are definitely dark and kind of the worst side of humanity that you're seeing, which is obviously the antagonist, where they're all looking out for themselves, they're violent, they're brutal, they don't care about people. You contrast that with the town where they're trying to work as a group, make things better for people, not use violence if they don't have to. Even though all that's going on, the tone is still much lighter. It never really feels as heavy as the first one does or as serious. And part of that could just be as simple as them leaning into the crazy outfits and the crazy cars and all the explosions and violence and guns. The gyrocopter guy is not super serious. There's not really any super close connections to Max. Like, the most that we get is the hot warrior chick is like, I was wrong about you. And Papa Gallo being like, you're a sack of dog shit if you only think of yourself. But as far as the connections with the characters, we don't really go too much beyond that. The Gyrocopter guy's got his back. You know, they're kind of bros for the movie. He's close to his dog, but his dog gets killed. And this one has action much more laden throughout, as opposed to the first one where it really kind of takes its time getting you into it. And the action is kind of backloaded in that one. And it's much more muted as well. I mean, there's definitely car crashes and explosions and all that sort of shit. But this one, there's way more. And you can tell they had the money for it. So they went all in with it. So as far as which one was better, I would say the first one is probably the more well-written movie. But if I was going to rewatch one, I think this one was a lot more enjoyable. Just a lot more fun, a lot more over the top. The pacing was very fast. It's only an hour-and-a-half movie, in, out, super easy watch. Not a ton of emotional investment, just a lot of fun. And I would say that if you like Fury Road, it's very clear that this is the predecessor to that. But overall, good recommendation. Thanks, Jay. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you think. If you haven't, I think it's worth checking out, especially as far as older movies go. And if you appreciate not everything being a fucking CG fest, I try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.